She thought she had found paradise. Catherine Johannet was just 23 years old when she posted a photo from a breathtaking island in Panama with the caption, "I found paradise." Less than 2 days later, she was gone, vanished on a hiking trail. 3 days after that, her body was found, strangled with her own pink beach cover-up. But the horror didn't end there. The killer? A 17-year-old local predator who had been watching tourists for months. And as investigators searched for answers, they uncovered a dark truth that turned this paradise into a place of nightmares. This is the story of Catherine Johannet, and by the end of this video, you'll understand how one decision to explore alone turned a dream vacation into a nightmare that would shock 2 nations. Before we dive into Catherine's story, I need to ask for your help with something important. If you're someone who believes that victims like Catherine deserve thorough, respectful investigations that don't just sensationalize tragedy, but actually seek truth and justice, then please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel if you want deep dives into cases that matter, stories that go beyond headlines to explore the real human impact and the difficult questions about safety that we all need to face. And ring that notification bell, because next week we're covering a case that will completely change how you think about trusting strangers when you travel. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who care about justice, not just entertainment. Catherine's story deserves to be heard by the right audience. Now let me tell you about the remarkable young woman whose life was cut short in paradise. You're 23 years old, you've just graduated from Columbia University, and you've already seen 6 continents. This is Catherine Johannet in February 2017, a young woman living the life most people only dream about. Catherine isn't your typical tourist. She's what you'd call a genuine explorer. By 23, she's already spent 18 months teaching English literature to students in Vietnam. She speaks French fluently, Portuguese too. Her Instagram is filled with breathtaking photos from every corner of the world. But what strikes you most isn't the exotic locations, it's her smile. In every single photo, Catherine radiates pure joy. Her family describes her as someone who was always there to listen to you and just enjoy life with her loved ones. Her brother Paul would later say she was cheerful, adventurous, thoughtful, and warm, all qualities I strive towards. But here's what makes Catherine different from so many young travelers. She's careful. Her mother would tell mourners at her funeral that Catherine was an explorer of people, places, and ideas, but not a risk-taker. She researches her destinations, stays in reputable hostels, keeps in touch with family. In early February 2017, Catherine arrives in Panama for what she believes will be another perfect adventure. She's staying at a hostel on Colon Island, in the Bocas del Toro region, a backpacker's paradise known for pristine beaches and incredible wildlife. The area is popular with young travelers exactly like Catherine. On February 1st, she posts that final Instagram photo, standing in crystal-clear water at Isla Ina, wearing sunglasses and a bright smile, with pillowy clouds reflected in the sea behind her. "I found paradise," she writes. What Catherine doesn't know is that someone else has found her too. Someone who's been watching. Someone who's been waiting. Catherine makes a decision that seems perfectly innocent, a day trip to nearby Bastimentos Island. But what happens on that trail would turn her dream vacation into every parent's worst nightmare. Thursday, February 2nd, 2017. Catherine Johannet is seen for the last time by hostel staff on Colon Island. She's planning what should be a simple day trip, an 11-mile boat ride to Bastimentos Island. If you've never been to Bastimentos, picture this, an island covered in lush rainforest, surrounded by Caribbean waters so clear you can see the bottom 20 feet down. It's famous for Red Frog Beach, where tiny strawberry poison dart frogs live in the trees. The hiking trails wind through dense jungle canopy where howler monkeys call to each other across the treetops. For someone like Catherine, someone who's hiked through Vietnam's mountains and explored 6 continents, this is exactly the kind of place that calls to her soul. The boat trip from Colon Island to Bastimentos takes about 10 minutes. Catherine likely spent the ride watching the islands grow larger, maybe chatting with other tourists, breathing in that salt air mixed with jungle vegetation. She's carrying her day pack, wearing her pink pareo as a beach cover-up, probably has her camera ready. The thing about Bastimentos is that it's designed for day trips. Most tourists come over in the morning, spend the day on the beaches or hiking the main trails, and catch a boat back before evening. The island has some accommodations, but most visitors, like Catherine, stay on nearby Colon Island, where there are more hostels and restaurants. But as Thursday afternoon stretches into evening, something's wrong. Catherine isn't on any of the boats heading back to Colon Island. The hostel staff start checking. Maybe she decided to stay overnight on Bastimentos? But Catherine is the type who would have called, would have changed her checkout time. By Thursday night, the hostel makes the call that probably saved precious investigation time. They report Catherine missing. Not 24 hours later, not after waiting to see if she shows up. They know immediately that this isn't like her. What the hostel staff don't know, what nobody knows yet, is that Catherine is already dead. Somewhere on that island she thought looked like paradise. Someone has ended her life with her own beach cover-up. Her body lies hidden on a trail that most tourists never find, in vegetation so thick that it will take searchers 3 days to discover her. But the person who killed her? They're already back to their normal routine, blending in with the local community, probably watching as the search efforts begin. The massive search begins, and investigators make a discovery that tells them immediately this was no accident. Catherine Johannette was murdered. Friday morning, February 3rd. While Catherine's family back in Scarsdale has no idea their daughter is even missing, Panamanian authorities are already mobilizing what will become one of the largest search operations in the region's history. The Joint Task Force of Panama's National Civil Protection System takes charge. These aren't just local police. This is a coordinated effort involving maritime units, jungle specialists, and search dogs. They understand that time is critical when someone goes missing in this terrain. Picture the challenge facing these searchers. Bastimentos Island is covered in dense rainforest. The trails range from well-maintained tourist paths to barely visible tracks that local indigenous communities have used for generations. There are ravines hidden by vegetation, streams that can sweep someone away, and areas so thick with jungle growth that you could walk within 10 feet of a person and never see them. The search teams split up systematically. Some focus on Red Frog Beach and the main tourist areas. Maybe Catherine fell, maybe she got disoriented and wandered off a trail. Others check with local residents, boat operators, anyone who might have seen a young American woman with a backpack. Meanwhile, back in New York, Catherine's family gets the call that every parent dreads. Their adventurous daughter, their laughing, adventurous, warm little girl, as her sister Laura would later write, is missing in a foreign country. But here's what shows you the kind of family Catherine comes from. They don't just sit and wait. By Monday, February 6th, the entire Johannette family is on planes to Panama. They bring missing person flyers, photos of Catherine smiling, her contact information, descriptions in both English and Spanish. The family spreads out across Bastimentos Island, working alongside the official search teams. Can you imagine that feeling? Walking jungle trails, calling your daughter's name, showing her photo to strangers, hoping beyond hope that someone has seen her, that maybe she's injured somewhere and can't get back? Sunday afternoon, February 5th, 2:11 p.m., a police officer is searching a section of trail that's not on any tourist map, what Panama's public security minister would later describe as a savage place where there is a lot of vegetation and not an official trail. The officer notices something that doesn't belong in the dense jungle setting. Something pink. It's Catherine's beach cover-up. But it's not lying on the ground like a dropped item. It's wrapped around the neck of Catherine Johannette's lifeless body, hidden in vegetation so thick that it's invisible from the main path. The officer immediately secures the scene and calls for investigators. Within hours, the search operation transforms into a homicide investigation. The U.S. Embassy in Panama confirms what the family already knows in their hearts: Catherine is dead. But what they're about to learn about how she died will haunt them forever. The autopsy results reveal the horrific truth about Catherine's final moments, and investigators realize they're hunting someone who knows these islands intimately, someone local, someone who's been watching tourists. The preliminary autopsy results come back on Tuesday, February 7th, and they confirm investigators' worst fears. Catherine Johannet was strangled to death with her own pink pareo, the beach cover-up she'd been wearing as a swimsuit cover-up during her day on the island. But here's what makes this particularly brutal. Forensic analysis shows the killer used the strings of the pareo to strangle her. This wasn't a random attack or a robbery gone wrong. Someone deliberately ended Catherine's life using the very item that represented her carefree vacation spirit. On arbitrary 7th, to assist Panamanian authorities, and immediately, the investigation kicks into high gear. They begin conducting raids across Bastimentos Island and nearby Colon Island. 8 people are detained for questioning in those first few weeks. Think about what investigators are facing here. Bastimentos Island has a small local population, but it sees hundreds of tourists every month. Could the killer be another tourist? A local guide? Someone who works at one of the hostels or restaurants? The raids turn up nothing concrete. The 8 people detained are eventually released. Investigators canvass every hostel, every restaurant, every boat operator. They interview other tourists who were on the island that Thursday. They check security cameras, though there are very few on an island that prides itself on being a natural paradise. Weeks turn into months. The case starts getting international attention, partly because of something chilling that local newspaper Panama America discovers. There might be a connection to another unsolved case. In 2014, just 35 miles from where Catherine's body was found, 2 Dutch tourists, 22-year-old Chris Kremers and 21-year-old Lizanne Froon, disappeared while hiking. Their remains were found months later under mysterious circumstances. Local newspapers start speculating. Could there be a serial killer targeting young female tourists in Panama? They compare evidence, look for patterns, interview anyone who might have information about both cases. But the Kremers and Froon case remains unsolved, and the evidence doesn't definitively link the cases. Asia 2017 turns into 2018. The Catherine Johannet investigation seems to be going nowhere. Despite hundreds of interviews, dozens of raids, and international cooperation, investigators have no solid leads on who killed the young Columbia graduate. The family holds their memorial service back in Scarsdale, but they never stop pressing for answers. They work with the U.S. Embassy. They stay in contact with Panamanian authorities. They keep Catherine's case in the media. What nobody realizes yet is that the killer has been living among the community all along, going about his normal routine, maybe even interacting with the investigators, appearing concerned about tourist safety like any other local resident. 8 months after Catherine's murder, one DNA test changes everything. Investigators finally get the break they've been waiting for, and the results will shock everyone who thought they knew this community. Before we dive into the breakthrough that finally brought Catherine's killer to justice, can I ask you for a quick favor? If you're as invested in finding out what happened to Catherine as I am, please hit that like button to help this story reach more people who care about justice for victims like her. Share this video with someone who appreciates deep investigations that go beyond surface-level reporting. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Don't forget to ring that notification bell. It's the only way to make sure you're here when we reveal cases that will challenge everything you think you know about crime and justice. Your support doesn't just help the channel, it helps ensure that stories like Catherine's get the thorough investigation and respectful coverage they deserve. Now let's get back to that DNA breakthrough that changed everything. October 2017, 8 months have passed since Catherine Johannet's murder, and investigators are still processing DNA evidence collected from the crime scene. What they don't know is that they're about to make a discovery that will crack the case wide open. Here's what's been happening behind the scenes. Panamanian forensic teams have been methodically testing DNA samples from the crime scene against a database of local residents. It's painstaking work. Each test takes time, and they have to be absolutely certain of their results before making any arrests. But on this particular day in October, a forensic technician gets results that make them call their supervisor immediately. They have a match. The DNA belongs to a 17-year-old local resident of Bocas del Toro, someone who lives in the very community where Catherine was staying, someone who would have known about the boat schedules, the tourist patterns, the secluded trails on Bastimentos Island. But here's what makes this even more chilling. This teenager wasn't some random suspect. His DNA was in the system because he was one of the hundreds of local residents who had voluntarily provided samples during the massive investigation. He had looked investigators in the eye and given them his DNA, probably confident that he'd never be caught. The arrest happened swiftly. Panamanian authorities, working with FBI agents, take the suspect into custody in Bocas del Toro. Because he's a minor under Panamanian law, only 17 at the time of the murder, his name isn't released publicly. But as investigators dig into this teenager's background, they start to understand the horrific nature of Catherine's murder. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. According to the prosecution's case, this was murder and robbery, 3 serious crimes committed against a young woman whose only mistake was trusting that she was safe in paradise. Think about what this means. Catherine Johannet, an experienced traveler who spoke multiple languages and had explored 6 continents safely, was targeted by someone who understood exactly how to exploit tourist patterns. Someone who knew which trails were isolated, which times of day were dangerous, how to avoid detection in a community where everyone thought they knew everyone else. The teenager had been living his normal life for 8 months while Catherine's family grieved, while her friends held memorial services, while investigators worked around the clock to find her killer. He attended school, interacted with neighbors, probably even participated in conversations about tourist safety and the terrible murder that had shocked the community. The arrest comes after what prosecutors describe as more than 200 DNA tests and 89 raids conducted over those 8 months. This wasn't a case solved by luck or a single breakthrough. This was methodical police work, the kind that requires testing every possible lead until you find the right one. But as the case moves toward trial, investigators uncover something else that will change how people think about safety in tourist destinations. This teenager didn't just randomly encounter Catherine on that trail. Evidence suggests he had been watching tourists, learning their patterns, possibly targeting other young women before Catherine. The question that haunts everyone involved in this case: how many other tourists might have encountered this predator without realizing it? How many young women walked those same trails, stayed in those same hostels, never knowing they were being watched by someone who had already committed murder? The trial reveals the horrific details of Catherine's final moments, and prosecutors argue for adult charges despite the killer's age. But the sentence he receives will spark outrage from Catherine's family and raise questions about justice for murdered tourists. The trial of Catherine Johannet's killer takes place in Panama, and because the defendant was 17 at the time of the murder, he's tried as a juvenile under Panamanian law. What emerges during the proceedings paints a picture of a calculated, brutal crime that devastated not just Catherine's family, but the entire tourist community. According to prosecutors, this wasn't a single crime. It was 3 separate serious offenses: murder, rape, and robbery. The teenager didn't just kill Catherine Johannet. He sexually assaulted her and stole from her before ending her life with her own beach cover-up. The forensic evidence tells the story of Catherine's final moments. She was on that secluded trail, what officials called a savage place with thick vegetation, when she encountered her killer. The physical evidence shows she fought for her life, but she was overpowered by someone who knew these trails intimately. The pink pareo that Catherine had been wearing as a cheerful beach cover-up, the same type of colorful wrap that thousands of young women wear on tropical vacations, became the weapon used to strangle her. The killer used the strings of the pareo itself, turning something that represented Catherine's joy and freedom into an instrument of death. During the trial, Catherine's family has to hear these details. They have to sit in a courtroom in a foreign country and listen to forensic experts describe how their laughing, adventurous, warm little girl spent her final moments fighting for her life against a teenager who saw her not as a human being, but as a target. The DNA evidence is overwhelming. The teenager's genetic material was found on Catherine's body and belongings. There's no question about his guilt. The only question is what kind of sentence he'll receive. But here's where the case takes a turn that enrages Catherine's family and supporters around the world. Because the killer was 17 at the time of the crime, he's sentenced as a juvenile to just 12 years in prison. 12 years for murder, rape, and robbery, for brutally ending the life of a 23-year-old woman whose only crime was wanting to explore the world, for traumatizing a family and community, for making every young female traveler question whether they're safe in places that market themselves as paradise. Panama's public ministry immediately appeals the sentence, arguing that the severity of the crimes, 3 separate serious offenses, warrants a much harsher punishment. But the damage is done. The message has been sent. If you're under 18 in Panama, you can commit horrific crimes against tourists and serve relatively little time. What makes this even more troubling is what investigators learned about the killer's behavior before Catherine's murder. This wasn't someone who just snapped one day. This was someone who had been watching tourists, learning their patterns, possibly planning attacks on other young women. The teenager lived in a community that depends on tourism. He grew up around foreign visitors, particularly young backpackers like Catherine. He understood their routines, their vulnerabilities, their trust in local communities, and he exploited all of it to commit one of the most brutal crimes in the region's history. For 8 months, while Catherine's family grieved and investigators worked day and night to find her killer, this teenager continued his normal life. He attended school, interacted with neighbors, possibly even expressed sympathy for the terrible tragedy that had befallen the young American tourist. The aftermath of Catherine's murder changes how her family views the world and raises difficult questions about tourist safety that destinations like Panama are still grappling with today. Today, Catherine Johanniet's killer is serving his 12-year sentence in a Panamanian prison. If he serves his full term, he'll be released when he's 29 years old, still young enough to rebuild his life in a way that Catherine will never have the chance to do. Born for the Johanniet family has tried to find meaning in their unimaginable loss. At Catherine's memorial service, her mother Alice spoke about her daughter being an explorer of people, places, and ideas who had a knack for being in the moment. Those words take on deeper meaning when you realize that Catherine's ability to live fully in each moment was exactly what made her vulnerable to someone who was watching and waiting. Her brother Paul shared a moment from when the family traveled to Panama to search for Catherine. Standing on an observation deck at the Panama Canal, a breeze picked up, and Paul said, "At that moment, I believe and hope that breeze was her." It's a beautiful sentiment from a family trying to find their sister's presence in a country that took her from them. Catherine's murder exposed uncomfortable truths about tourist safety in developing destinations. Panama markets itself as a paradise for young travelers, pristine beaches, adventure tourism, affordable backpacking opportunities. But Catherine's case revealed that the infrastructure for protecting tourists, particularly young women traveling alone, isn't always adequate. The connection that investigators explored to the unsolved murders of Dutch tourists Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon raises even more disturbing questions. While the cases weren't definitively linked, the pattern is troubling. Young female tourists, remote hiking areas, deaths under suspicious circumstances. Following Catherine's murder, Panamanian officials promised increased police presence in tourist areas and better safety protocols. But the fundamental challenge remains: how do you protect tourists who are drawn to destinations specifically because they're remote and undeveloped? Catherine's case changed how many young travelers, particularly women, think about solo adventure travel. Her Instagram post, "I found paradise and it's called Isla Ina," has become a haunting reminder that even paradise can hide predators. The 12-year sentence continues to spark debate about juvenile justice and crimes against tourists. Panama's public ministry lost their appeal for a harsher sentence, but the case highlighted how some legal systems aren't equipped to deal with tourists who become crime victims. What shouldn't be lost in all the legal and safety discussions is who Catherine Johannet was, a brilliant young woman who had taught English literature to students in Vietnam, who spoke multiple languages, who had already seen more of the world by 23 than most people see in a lifetime. She was someone who approached travel with joy and curiosity, not recklessness. Catherine's family asked that people around the world light candles at 11 a.m. during her memorial service. It was a beautiful request, a global moment of remembrance for a young woman whose love of exploration connected her to people and places everywhere. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to Catherine Johannet is that her story continues to inspire conversations about how to make the world safer for young travelers, particularly young women who refuse to let fear stop them from exploring this beautiful, dangerous world. Catherine Johannet found paradise in Panama. Tragically, paradise also contained the person who would end her life. Her story serves as both an inspiration to live fully and adventurously, and a sobering reminder that even in paradise, we must stay vigilant. The teenager who killed Catherine Johannet stole more than just her life. He stole her future adventures, her potential contributions to the world, and her family's sense of safety and trust, but he couldn't steal her impact. Catherine's story continues to protect other travelers by reminding us all that paradise can be dangerous, and that we must look out for each other when we're far from home. If Catherine's story has stayed with you the way it's stayed with me, hit that like button if you want to see more investigations into cases that expose the uncomfortable truths about how we protect travelers, how we define justice, and how one moment of trust can change everything. Subscribe and ring that notification bell. Next week, we're diving into a case where the victim survived to tell their story, but what they revealed about their attacker will make you question everything you think you know about predators hiding in plain sight. Until then, remember, Catherine Johannet wasn't just a statistic or a headline. She was a daughter who called home regularly, a sister who listened without judgment, a teacher who inspired students halfway around the world. Her story matters not just because of how it ended, but because of how brilliantly she lived. Keep exploring, keep being curious about the world. But remember Catherine's story, and trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even in paradise. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks like they belong there.